Hi.
Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be the guy posting something like this, but here I am. I need to get this out because keeping it bottled up is driving me insane. Maybe writing it all down will help me make sense of how my entire world fell apart. How the woman I loved, trusted, and built a life with turned out to be the biggest liar I've ever met. My name's Brett, and up until last year I thought I had the perfect life. I run a successful business, live in a beautiful house, and had what I thought was a rock-solid marriage with my wife Lauren. We had been together for nearly a decade, married for 5 years, and I truly believed we were happy. At least I was. Looking back, I can't believe how blind I was. Lauren had always been dramatic. She liked attention, needed constant validation, and had a habit of twisting situations to make herself the victim, but I brushed it off as just part of her personality. She had expensive taste, always wanted the best of everything, and sometimes made me feel like a walking wallet, but I ignored those red flags because I loved her. I worked hard to provide for us, thinking that's what a good husband does. Then, out of nowhere, she started acting strange. At first, it was little things. She was suddenly glued to her phone, smiling at texts and tilting her screen away from me. She started staying late at work more often, despite always complaining about hating her job. She started picking fights over the dumbest things, like the way I loaded the dishwasher or the fact that I was too distant. I tried to be understanding. I even asked her if something was wrong, if she was stressed, if she needed more from me emotionally. She would sigh dramatically, say I was imagining things, and turn it around on me, making me feel like a paranoid idiot. I almost believed her. But then came the night that shattered everything. She had told me she was going on a girls' trip for the weekend. Now, Lauren isn't the outdoorsy type, so when she said they were going to a cozy cabin in the mountains, I was surprised. She and her friends were all about spas, fancy restaurants, and Instagram-worthy vacations, not hiking and campfires. Something felt off, but I didn't push it. I trusted her. That Friday I was at home, trying to distract myself with work when I got a call from one of Lauren's friends, Rachel. She sounded awkward, hesitant. "Hey Brett. I thought you should know something." That's when she told me. Lauren wasn't on a girls' trip. There was no cabin. She was in a 5-star hotel in the city, with another man. My stomach dropped. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Rachel sent me a screenshot of a group chat where Lauren had bragged about how her man was taking her on a romantic getaway. Except, I wasn't that man. I don't even remember grabbing my keys, but before I knew it I was in my car, speeding toward the hotel. My hands were shaking. My vision felt blurry. Every worst-case scenario was playing in my head, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to see. I don't even remember parking my car. One second I was speeding through the city and the next I was standing outside the hotel, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Rachel had sent me the name of the hotel, but I didn't know what room Lauren was in. I could have gone to the front desk and asked, but what would I even say? "Hi, my wife is cheating on me. Could you point me to the room where she's ruining our marriage?" Instead, I walked straight to the bar. If she was staying at a place this fancy, she'd probably be drinking before heading up to the room. And sure enough, there she was. Lauren sat at a high-top table, looking way too comfortable with some guy I had never seen before. She had that stupid, flirty smile on her face, the one I used to think was reserved just for me. She was leaning in close, laughing, twirling her hair, touching his arm like he was the most interesting person in the world. I just stood there. I don't know how long I watched before the rage kicked in, but when it did, it hit hard. My hands clenched into fists, my jaw locked, and I felt a pressure in my chest like my entire body was trying to hold back an explosion. I forced myself to walk up to the table. I didn't cause a scene, not yet. I just pulled out the chair across from them and sat down. Lauren was too busy giggling at whatever garbage this guy was saying to notice me right away. But then she looked up. Her whole face dropped. Brett? What are you doing here?" She stammered, blinking like she was seeing a ghost. The guy, who was definitely younger than me, maybe mid-20s, with the kind of smarmy confidence that made my skin crawl, looked between us, confused but not nervous. "Lauren? Who's this?" he asked. I turned my attention to him, keeping my voice level. "I'm her husband." His face barely changed. No guilt, no surprise, just a lazy smirk. Oh. Oh. That's all he had to say? Lauren immediately launched into damage control, flipping a switch so fast it gave me whiplash. "Babe, this isn't what it looks like," she started, reaching for my hand. I pulled back before she could touch me. "Not what it looks like," I repeated, tilting my head. "So you're not here on a romantic getaway with this guy?" She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the guy laughed. "Wow. She actually did have a husband," he said, shaking his head. Then he turned to Lauren. "You told me you were divorced." My whole body went cold. Lauren's face turned white as a sheet. I was going to tell you." I stood up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. "Save it." I wanted to scream. I wanted to humiliate her, make a scene, make her feel the same shock and pain I was feeling. But suddenly I didn't want to be in that room for another second. Lauren reached for me again. "Brett, please, let's go somewhere and talk." I stepped back. "No. You can stay here with him, your boyfriend or whatever you've been calling him. But you and I? We're done." And with that I walked out. She chased me into the lobby calling my name, but I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. I just kept walking. I wish I could say that walking out of that hotel felt like some dramatic, empowering moment, like I took back control of my life right then and there. But the truth? I felt numb. I barely remember the drive home. My brain was stuck in a loop, replaying Lauren's face when she got caught. Not a face of guilt or remorse, just panic that she had been exposed. And then there was that guy. The way he smirked, the way he laughed when he realized she was lying to both of us. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my phone was blowing up. "Lauren. Brett, please just let me explain." "Lauren, you're overreacting. It's not what you think." "Lauren, come home so we can talk." I ignored all of it. Instead, I just sat in my car, staring at the house we had built together, thinking about how none of it felt real anymore. Then, just as I was about to go inside, headlights flashed in my rearview mirror. "Lauren." She sped into the driveway, barely putting the car in park before jumping out. She ran toward me, still wearing that fancy dress, her makeup slightly smudged from either crying or the humidity. "Brett, please," she panted, reaching for my arm. "Can we talk?" I pulled away. "Talk about what, Lauren? How you lied. How you've been sneaking around. How you told that guy you were divorced." She shook her head frantically. No, it's not like that. I said that because I knew he wouldn't understand if I told him the truth. I didn't mean it like that." I let out a dry laugh. "Oh, so when you said you were divorced you actually meant married? That's a new one." Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't buying it. I needed this." I stared at her. "You needed this?" She gulped, realizing how bad that sounded. "I mean, I needed attention. You've been so distant lately, always working, always focused on business. I felt like I was disappearing in this marriage, Brett. I just wanted to feel wanted again." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So your solution was to go behind my back? To sleep with some guy?" Her lips parted, and for the first time, real fear flickered in her eyes. "I didn't sleep with him." I crossed my arms. "Really? So you just booked a romantic weekend getaway to hold hands?" She took a shaky breath. "We kissed. Once. But that's all, I swear." I just stared at her. I had spent years with this woman. I knew exactly when she was lying, and this was one of those times. "You expect me to believe that?" I asked. "It's the truth." She cried. "Brett, please, I made a mistake, but it's not as bad as you think." That's when I snapped. "Not as bad as I think?" I barked, stepping closer. "Lauren, you lied to me. You lied to him. You planned an entire weekend with another man and only got caught because your own friend felt guilty enough to tell me. And now, instead of owning up to it, you're trying to downplay it." She was full-on crying now, but I didn't care. "Not anymore. I love you," she whispered. "I don't want to lose you." I shook my head. You already lost me. I turned, walked into the house and slammed the door behind me. She banged on it for a while, begging me to let her in, promising she'd do anything to fix this. But I didn't answer. Because for the first time since this nightmare started, I knew exactly what I had to do. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My entire marriage had just been exposed as a lie, and now I had to figure out what came next. Lauren eventually gave up banging on the door around 2 a.m., but not before sending another flood of texts. Lauren, please don't do anything rash. Lauren, I love you. I swear I do. Lauren, it was just a stupid mistake. We can fix this. Funny. She was real interested in fixing things now that she got caught. The next morning I woke up, if you could even call it waking up, exhausted but with a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't something we could work through. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. A choice she made over and over every time she texted him, met up with him, lied to my face. I was done. I didn't respond to her texts. Instead, I called a divorce lawyer. I explained everything, and after hearing the details, she said we had a strong case for infidelity. Since we had a prenup, which Lauren hated when I first brought it up years ago, she wouldn't get a dime beyond what was fair. By noon, I had everything in motion. That's when Lauren showed up. I was in the middle of making coffee when I heard the knock, softer this time. Less desperate. I knew she wouldn't stop until I answered, so I opened the door. She looked rough. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was messy, and she was still wearing that stupid dress from last night. It was like she had nowhere else to go. We need to talk, she said, her voice small. I leaned against the doorway. We don't, actually. Her eyes filled with tears. Brett, please. Just let me explain. Explain what? I snapped. That you got caught? That you only care now because your little fantasy weekend got ruined? She shook her head, stepping closer. I made a mistake, but I never stopped loving you. Her voice cracked. I felt neglected. You were always working. I felt like I was invisible in my own marriage. I clenched my jaw. So instead of talking to me like an adult, you found some other guy to make you feel better? She flinched, but I wasn't done. You didn't just slip up and cheat, Lauren. You planned this. You lied to my face over and over. You told another man you were divorced. She wiped her eyes. I only said that because I knew he wouldn't understand. I never meant it. I shook my head. Do you even hear yourself? You're not sorry you did it, you're sorry you got caught. That's when she did something I didn't expect. She dropped to her knees. Right there on the porch she collapsed, sobbing, clutching my hands. Please don't leave me, she begged. I can't lose you, Brett. I swear I'll do anything to make this right. Just tell me what to do. For a brief second I felt something, pity maybe. But then I remembered what she did. The lies. The manipulation. The way she only cared after I found out. I pulled my hands away. It's already done, I said coldly. I called a lawyer this morning. You'll be hearing from them soon. Her breath hitched. You already filed? I nodded. I don't want to hear any more of your excuses, Lauren. We're over. For a moment, she just stared at me like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then, all at once, the sadness vanished from her face, replaced by anger. You're really going to throw away everything we built over one mistake? She hissed, standing up so fast it startled me. I let out a bitter laugh. You threw it away first. She let out a humorless chuckle, shaking her head. Wow. I always knew you were cold, but this? You're heartless. I opened the door wider. Then it should be easy for you to leave. She glared at me for a few seconds, like she was debating whether to say something else. Then, with a scoff, she turned on her heel and stormed off. I watched her get into her car, slamming the door shut. She sat there for a while, gripping the wheel before peeling out of the driveway. And just like that, she was gone. For the first time in years, I felt free. I had no idea that this disaster would eventually lead me to someone who would truly change my life. But that part comes later. I expected Lauren to go quiet after that. I thought she'd take the divorce papers, slink away in shame and let me move on in peace. But nope. That wasn't Lauren's style. The first sign of trouble came a few days later when mutual friends started texting me. Some confused, some furious. "Dude, why didn't you tell me you cheated on Lauren? I can't believe you're leaving her just because she made one mistake. Lauren's saying you've been emotionally abusive for years? WTF is going on?" Turns out, while I was busy trying to clean up the wreckage of my life, Lauren was out there rewriting history. She wasn't just playing the victim, she was flipping the entire story. Suddenly I was the bad guy. I was the distant, neglectful husband who drove her to cheat. According to her, she tried to talk to me about her feelings, but I never listened. She was forced into another man's arms because I treated her like a stranger. Oh, and the best part. Apparently, I had been cheating on her for months. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to scream. I texted back the people who reached out, setting the record straight. I told them the real story. How Lauren had planned the affair, how she lied to both me and her side piece, how she only started begging for forgiveness after she got caught. Some believed me. Some didn't. And some just wanted to stay out of it. I learned real quick who my real friends were. Then came the begging phase. Lauren must have realized her smear campaign wasn't working because she suddenly switched gears. "Lauren, I was so angry when you left me, Brett. I wasn't thinking clearly. Lauren, can we please just meet one last time? I need closure. Lauren, I miss you. We were supposed to grow old together. I don't know how to live without you." I ignored it all. Then, a few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I picked up out of habit, and the second I said hello, a voice burst into tears. It was Lauren's mom. "Brett, please. Just talk to her," she pleaded. "She's a wreck. She's barely eating, barely sleeping. She made a mistake, but don't throw your whole marriage away over one bad decision." I sighed, gripping the phone tighter. She didn't make one bad decision, she made hundreds of them. She lied to me over and over. And now she's lying to everyone else, trying to make me the bad guy. I'm done. Lauren's mom sniffled. "I know what she did was wrong. But she loves you. She's sorry." I shook my head. "She's only sorry because she lost." Silence. Then, in a quieter voice, Lauren's mom said, "I just don't want her to do anything reckless." And that almost got me. Almost. But I wasn't falling for it this time. "If you're worried about her, get her into therapy," I said. "But I'm not her emotional support system anymore." And I hung up. That was the moment it really hit me. Lauren was never going to change. She wasn't capable of true remorse. She just wanted control, over me, over the story, over everything. She lost that when I walked out of that hotel. Now it was time for me to figure out what came next. What I didn't know was that fate had already set something in motion. Something, or rather someone, who was about to change my life in ways I never expected. After cutting Lauren off completely, I expected my life to feel lighter. Like I could finally breathe again. But if I'm being honest, it was just empty. I had spent so many years wrapped up in that toxic marriage that I had no idea who I was outside of it. Work kept me busy, but the nights were the worst. I'd sit in my too big house, staring at the walls, feeling like a ghost of my own life. Then one day, about 3 weeks after the divorce process started, I got a call from a business contact, an old mentor of mine who ran a bunch of charities. He wanted to meet for dinner to discuss a potential partnership. Sounded simple enough. I agreed, thinking it'd be a good distraction. What I didn't expect was her. I showed up at this high-end restaurant expecting to meet just my mentor, but when I got to the table, there was someone else sitting with him. A woman. She was dressed professionally, nothing flashy, just simple and elegant. Her hair was tied back, but a few loose strands framed her face. And her eyes. I don't even know how to describe them. Sharp but warm. Like she could read you in a second, but wouldn't judge you for what she found. "This is Christina," my mentor introduced. "She runs the charity for homeless women I told you about." I blinked. "Christina." She smiled. Most people call me Chris. For a split second I was thrown. I had seen her name in the email invite but assumed she was a man. Not that it mattered, but it caught me off guard. I shook her hand and that's when I noticed something. Her grip was firm. Confident. No hesitation. We sat down and as the conversation went on, I found myself actually listening. Not just nodding along out of politeness, but actually interested in what she had to say. Chris wasn't just passionate about her work, she was sharp. Smart. She had a way of explaining things that made you feel them. And for the first time in weeks I forgot about Lauren. Halfway through dinner I realized something weird. I was enjoying myself. Not in a romantic way, at least not yet. But in a way that made me feel human again. Like I wasn't just some broken guy whose wife shattered his life. Chris didn't pry into my personal life, but at one point, she made a casual comment that caught me off guard. "I don't know you very well, Brett, but you seem like someone who's carrying a lot of weight on your shoulders." I tensed. "That obvious?" She gave me a knowing smile. "I work with women who've been through hell. You start to recognize the look of someone who's trying to rebuild." For some reason that hit hard. Because she was right. That's exactly what I was trying to do. By the time dinner wrapped up, my mentor had to leave early, but Chris and I stayed behind, still talking. It wasn't flirting, not really. It was just easy. And after everything I'd been through, easy felt like a damn miracle. As we got up to leave, she paused. "You know," she said, glancing at me, "I could use someone like you on the charities board. We're looking for new people with business expertise." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering me a job?" Chris grinned. "More like a chance to do something meaningful with your time." And just like that, for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something, like maybe, just maybe, life wasn't completely ruined after all. I had no idea then, but this wasn't just a random meeting. Chris was about to become the most important person in my life. After that dinner, I couldn't stop thinking about Chris. Not in a romantic way, at least that's what I told myself. It was just refreshing to talk to someone who wasn't lying to my face. A few days later I got a text. "Chris, hey Brett. Thought about my offer?" Me, still deciding. "Why?" "Chris, because we're hosting a fundraiser this Friday. Come see what we do." I hesitated. A month ago I wouldn't have even considered it. But now, maybe this was what I needed. Me, alright. I'll be there. I had no idea that saying yes to that invitation would change everything. Friday came fast. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when I walked into the event, I was impressed. The place was packed, donors, volunteers, even some of the women the charity had helped. Then I spotted Chris. She was across the room, deep in conversation, completely in her element. Confident. Sharp. Genuine. When she finally saw me, she smiled. "You actually showed up." I smirked. "Told you I would." She handed me a drink. "Come on. Let me show you what we're all about." For the next hour she introduced me to people, real people whose lives had changed because of this organization. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about Lauren. I was thinking about something bigger. And maybe, just maybe, about Chris. As the night went on, I found myself actually enjoying the fundraiser. Chris was an incredible host, engaging, passionate, and completely at ease. At one point we stepped outside for some air. The city lights reflected off the windows and for the first time in weeks I felt calm. Chris glanced at me. "You seem different from dinner the other night." I raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" She smiled. "Less like a man carrying the weight of the world." I exhaled, looking out at the skyline. Maybe it's because, for the first time in a while, I don't feel like my life is falling apart. Chris didn't say anything, but when I turned back to her, she was watching me. Not judging. Just seeing me. And something about that moment made my chest tighten. As we stood there, Chris tilted her head. "So, what actually brought you here tonight, Brett?" I chuckled. "You invited me." She smirked. "That's not what I meant." I hesitated. For a second I thought about brushing it off. But something about Chris made me want to be honest. I needed to get out of my own head, I admitted. And I guess I wanted to see if this could be something worth focusing on. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. I think it could be. There was no pity in her voice, no fake sympathy, just a simple, honest answer. And for the first time in a long time I actually believed it. As the night wrapped up, Chris walked me to the door. "So, what's the verdict?" she asked. "Think you'll stick around?" I exhaled, glancing back at the room full of people. "Yeah. I think I might." She grinned. "Good. We could use someone like you." For the first time in weeks I felt like I had purpose again. And maybe, just maybe, something even more. The next morning I woke up feeling different. For the first time in weeks my first thought wasn't Lauren. It was Chris. Not in a romantic way, at least that's what I kept telling myself, but in a new way. I checked my phone. A text from her. "Chris, glad you came last night. Hope it wasn't too overwhelming." I hesitated, then typed back. Me, actually it was exactly what I needed. And for once that wasn't a lie. Later that day Chris called. Not texted, called. "Hey," she said. "I was thinking, wanna grab lunch?" No pressure, just a casual thing. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, but because it felt like a step. A step toward something I wasn't sure I was ready for. But then I heard myself say, "Yeah. I'd like that." Chris laughed lightly. "Good. I'll text you the place." As I hung up I realized something. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't dreading what came next. I was actually looking forward to it. When I walked into the restaurant, Chris was already there, casually sipping her drink. She looked up and smiled. Easy. Natural. No tension. "Didn't think you'd actually show," she teased. I smirked. "And miss a free meal?" We talked, about work, travel, random things. Nothing deep, nothing heavy. But it felt good. Then, out of nowhere, Chris asked, "Do you think you'll ever trust someone again?" I froze for half a second. Lauren's face flashed in my mind. But then I looked at Chris. And for the first time, I wasn't so sure of my old answer. "Maybe," I admitted. And for the first time I almost believed it. As lunch wrapped up, Chris leaned back in her chair, studying me. "You know, you don't seem as broken as you think you are." I let out a small laugh. "That obvious?" She shrugged. "I just think people heal in ways they don't expect." I thought about that. About how, just a few weeks ago, I felt like my life was over. And yet, here I was, sitting across from someone who made me feel like maybe, just maybe, it wasn't. As we stood to leave, Chris smiled. "So, think you'll stick around the charity for a while?" I met her gaze and for the first time I didn't hesitate. "Yeah. I think I will." And just like that I took my first real step toward something new. Maybe even someone new.
Goodbye.